I never thought I would be the kind of man who took the law into his own hands, but then again, I never thought I'd be burying my only daughter while her killer walked out of a courtroom with a smirk on his face. They tell you that the system is designed to protect the innocent and punish the guilty, but after 20 years in the military, I've seen enough of the world to know that justice is often just a word people use to keep the peace. When the judge hammered that gavel and declared a mistrial due to a technicality in the search warrant, ignoring the blood on the floor and the DNA under her fingernails, I felt something inside of me break that no amount of therapy or time could ever fix. I stood there in my dress blues, my back straight and my face a mask of discipline, looking at the man who had torn my world apart, and in that moment I didn't see a defendant, I saw a target. I have to ask you all straight up, if the person who destroyed your entire reason for living was walking free because a lawyer filed the right piece of paper, would you just go home and try to move on, or would you do what needs to be done? Was I wrong to decide that if the law wouldn't serve justice, I would have to serve it myself with the only language men like him understand? My name is Mark, and before everything went to hell, I was a career soldier. I spent 2 decades as an Army Ranger, deploying more times than I care to count, seeing things that would give most people nightmares for a lifetime. I lived by a code of honor, duty, and sacrifice. But through every deployment, every cold night in a foxhole, and every brush with death, there was one thing that kept me grounded: my daughter, Ellie. Her mother passed away when she was just a toddler, so it was always just the 2 of us against the world. I missed birthdays and graduations, but we had a bond that was unbreakable. When I finally retired 2 years ago, I promised her that I was done with the fighting. I bought a small ranch, started a woodworking business, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. Ellie was 22, finishing her nursing degree, and she was the brightest light I've ever known. She had this way of looking at the world that made even a cynical old grunt like me believe people were generally good. Then came that Tuesday night in November. She was supposed to come over for dinner, but she never showed up. I called her phone a dozen times. I drove to her apartment. I found the door kicked in and her car still in the driveway. The police found her 48 hours later in a shallow grave near the outskirts of town. The man they arrested was a local piece of work named Travis Vance. He was the son of a wealthy developer in the county, a guy who had been in and out of trouble his whole life, but always seemed to slide by. The evidence was overwhelming, or so I thought. They found his DNA, they found the struggle marks, and they found her belongings in his trunk. But Travis had the best lawyers money could buy. They argued that the initial search of his vehicle was conducted without proper probable cause, and through a series of legal maneuvers and a judge who was likely in his father's pocket. The most damning evidence was suppressed. The trial was a farce. I sat in that gallery every single day, watching that coward whisper to his lawyers and laugh during the breaks. When the mistrial was declared and the charges were dropped, I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I just watched him walk out those double doors, his father patting him on the back like he'd just won a high school football game. I went back to my empty house, sat in Ellie's room, and realized that the man I used to be, the soldier, was the only person who could help me now. I spent the next 3 weeks in a state of cold, calculated preparation. My military training didn't just teach me how to shoot. It taught me how to observe, how to plan, and how to execute with surgical precision. I tracked Travis's routine. I found out where he went to drink, who he hung out with, and more importantly, where he felt safe. He lived in a gated community, thinking those stone walls and security cameras would keep the world out. He didn't realize that for a man with my background, those obstacles were just minor inconveniences. I cleaned my old service rifle, a piece of equipment that had never failed me, and I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is chaotic. This was something different. This was a mission. This was the final duty I owed to my daughter. I knew the risks. I knew that if I did this, I would likely spend the rest of my life in a cage or end up in the ground myself. But as I looked at the photos of Ellie's smiling face on my mantel, I knew I couldn't live another day knowing her killer was out there enjoying the life he stole from her. So here I was, perched on a ridge overlooking the sprawling estate where Travis was throwing a party to celebrate his freedom. I could see him through the scope, holding a drink, surrounded by people who didn't care what he'd done as long as the champagne was flowing. I had the crosshairs on him, and my finger was on the trigger. But then I hesitated, not out of fear, but out of a sudden realization of what this would mean for my legacy and for Ellie's memory. Before I tell you what happened when I took that shot and the absolute chaos that followed, I want you to pause. Think about everything this man took from me and how the system spat in my face. If you were lying in the dirt with a clear shot at the monster who killed your child, would you pull the trigger, or would you walk away and try to find a legal way to handle it? Drop a comment right now and tell me what you would have done in my shoes, because what I did next changed everything forever. I took a deep breath, slowing my heart rate just like I'd been taught 1,000 times before. I squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle echoed through the valley, and I watched through the optics as the glass in Travis's hand shattered. I didn't kill him, not yet. I wanted him to feel the terror my daughter felt. I fired again, hitting the ground inches from his feet, sending him scrambling into the dirt. The party erupted into a frenzy of screams and running bodies. I moved from my position, repositioning with the speed of a man half my age. I had cut the power to the main house 5 minutes prior, and the backup generators hadn't kicked in yet. In the darkness and the confusion, I was a ghost. I breached the perimeter fence and made my way toward the patio where Travis was cowering behind a marble pillar. His friends had long since vanished. When I stepped into the light of the emergency lanterns, he looked up at me, his face pale and covered in sweat. He recognized me instantly. He started begging, crying about how it was an accident, how his dad could give me money, how he'd go back to court and confess. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I saw the coward for what he really was. A small, pathetic man who only felt big when he was hurting someone weaker than him. I had my sidearm drawn, pointed right at his chest. The police sirens were already audible in the distance. Someone had called them the moment the first shot rang out. I had maybe 3 minutes before the perimeter was swarmed. I looked at Travis, and for a second I thought about Ellie's laugh, her dreams of being a nurse, and the way she used to call me her hero. I realized that if I killed him right there, I'd be letting him off easy. He'd be dead, and I'd be the villain in the headlines. I lowered the gun, and instead, I pulled out a digital recorder. I had spent those 3 weeks not just tracking him, but bugging his house. On that recorder was a conversation I'd captured 2 nights prior. Travis bragging to his father about how he'd strangled Ellie and how easy it had been to fool the cops. I tossed the recorder at his feet and told him that the technicality that saved him wouldn't save him from a federal civil rights investigation and the new evidence I'd gathered. But I also let him know that from this day forward, I would be the shadow in the corner of his eye. I told him that every time he turned a corner, every time he walked to his car, every time he closed his eyes, he'd be wondering if I was there. The police arrived and found me sitting on the patio furniture. my weapons cleared and disassembled on the table, and Travis Vance curled in a fetal position, sobbing. The recording I provided was turned over to a different jurisdiction, one where his father's influence didn't reach. The federal prosecutors took the case, using the recording and several other pieces of evidence I'd uncovered during my surveillance that the local cops had conveniently missed. Travis is currently serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole in a maximum security facility. His father's business empire crumbled under the weight of the scandal. As for me, I served a year for the weapons charges and the discharge of a firearm, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I didn't have to become a murderer to get justice. I just had to become the soldier one last time to force the truth into the light. My daughter can finally rest, and while the house is still quiet, it doesn't feel as empty anymore. Sometimes the law is a blunt instrument that misses the mark, and it takes someone with the right tools to sharpen it. I learned that you don't always have to break the world to fix what's broken, but you do have to be willing to stand up when everyone else is sitting down. If you think I handled this the right way, or if you think I should have finished the job that night on the patio, let me know in the comments. Like this video if you believe that a father's love knows no bounds, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next time a story needs to be told. Your support helps keep this channel going and ensures these stories get heard. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I read every single one of them. I'll see you all in the next story.